Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Moms Like Me podcast powered by Support Now. This morning, I am joined with a really incredible mom who is also a social media influencer who has done an incredible job documenting her journey being a mom of two kids with a very rare genetic disorder. And she's also a cancer survivor herself. So, Julia, welcome to the podcast. If you don't mind, I'd love for you to start by sharing a little bit more about your story for those that might not be as acquainted.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I feel like it was kind of a miracle how we connected, honestly. So it's an honor to be here today. And to catch you up to speed, a little bit about our story. My name is Julia Ehrman, and I have two kids with a rare genetic disorder. My husband and I had been married for 5 years. We literally had this perfect life. We lived in a 500 square foot cabin on the most beautiful lake you've ever seen in Washington State. And we had the white picket fence life. We got pregnant after 5 years and had a perfect pregnancy, was glowing, everything. And we had Hazel. She was born. My husband delivered her. She came out. Her APGAR scores were perfect. And we were over the moon. Everything was perfect. We brought Hazel home from the hospital. And overnight, she started acting a little bit funny, but we never assumed anything out of the ordinary things would be wrong with her. She was tapping her foot a little bit, but we didn't really notice. And she was arching her back. And so I got my baby mom book out that every mom has. And I'm like, flip to the page. I'm like, back arching. Oh, gas. Okay, for sure. She's got gas. Okay. And she wasn't latching very well, but we thought, okay, whatever. No big deal. Babies do weird things. We'd been prepared. And she went to sleep. When Hazel woke up in the morning, we knew we had to take her into the hospital because the only thing that was slightly abnormal with Hazel was her bilirubin was slightly elevated. And so the doctors let us go home and they just said, bring her back the next day and we'll test her bilirubin. So we woke up in the morning knowing that. And I just had this gut feeling that something wasn't right based on what had happened overnight. And so my husband and I kind of rushed out of the house. And as soon as we saw Hazel in the daylight, she was pale. And so at that point we knew, we need to rush to the hospital. We got to the hospital and the head NICU doc, through a miracle, ended up laying her eyes on Hazel. And Hazel stopped breathing right when she looked at her. I didn't even know what happened at the time, but the doctor grabbed Hazel out of my arms, ran her down the hall, and I was frozen in time thinking just all these crazy things that new moms think. When am I going to breastfeed? I'm recovering from a massive pregnancy and tears and all the things. And in the split second, my baby's being rushed down the hallway. The nurses grabbed me and they were like, follow us this way. And I was like, okay. I didn't even know what was up from down or even that she had stopped breathing yet. And I walked into a room and it was pitch dark and Hazel was laying on the table and there was 6 to 8 people pounding away at my brand new baby. And the only way to explain it is to just imagine your highest high you've ever had. A brand new, perfect firstborn baby to your lowest low of holy moly, God's going to take her away from me. And I remember just being frozen in time in that moment. And that was the dramatic moment that really launched us into this phase of life which I often call Hazel happened. And they intubated Hazel and they hooked her up to every tube you could imagine. And they took her in the ambulance to the downtown campus, which was the big hospital. My husband and I loaded up in the car with the empty car seat in the back. And we were shook to our core. I just remember driving in the car and my brain hadn't even, it wasn't computing yet. But all I knew was that we're leaving the hospital. The car seat's empty. This is not right. We spent a month in the hospital with Hazel as she laid there like a vegetable. And we had no answers. At one point, I talked to the neurologist and I looked at him and I said, I know she's got global brain damage. is there a possibility that her brain could reroute? And he just looked at me deadpan and he was like, where to? So we left the hospital. Hazel had a feeding tube. She was missing lots of milestones and we had no answers. Um, that first year of Hazel's life was intense. Like we did not I'm pretty sure I blacked it out. It was so intense just jumping into parenthood. And upon becoming a parent, but also a parent to a child with severe needs, we didn't really know what to do. And among that year, kind of an aspect that I leave out often in my story is that when Hazel was about 8 months old, my mom was overnight diagnosed with colon cancer. She was not sick, she was thriving, and she passed away right before Hazel turned 1 year old. Um, and the first time I was ever away from Hazel was to go be in the hospital with my mom. Um, Now, Hazel turned 2 and she started sitting up and she had joy. And we kind of felt like we're getting our feet back under us after becoming special needs parents. And we decided to start trying for a second. We had been dismissed from children's genetics. And if you're listening, and maybe that's been your experience as well, sometimes children's genetics dismisses you, and your child still has a genetic disorder. So we knew that, but nothing was coming up. We kept trying to search for answers for what was going on with Hazel, and there were none. And so we stepped out in faith. We decided to have another baby. And I found out I was pregnant with Russell, and I was diagnosed with cervical cancer. I had been having symptoms for over a year, and I had been visually examined by 3 doctors prior to the fourth, and they all missed that I had a massive tumor hanging off the end of my cervix. And the first time that we actually got to see Russell on an ultrasound was to see the tumor. And I remember seeing it and it was clear as day. There's this massive tumor hanging off the end of my cervix. So we did a cone biopsy and our goal was to keep our baby. And so they did not get clean margins. And so since it was so early in the pregnancy and the tumor was so big, it was almost pushing into stage 2 cancer. They didn't know how fast it was growing. And so Russell and I went through 4 rounds of chemo. And he was born at 35 weeks. And when he was born, he had hair and I had no hair. And I remember thinking, like, wow, like God is so good. When he designed the womb, like the womb is so protective of babies. I think a lot of us panic about, the things that we put in our bodies when we're pregnant. And that is really important. But overall, like, it just was a clear sign that, my baby was protected. He was born healthy and normal. Right after they delivered him, they took Russell and my husband off to a postpartum, and I had a radical hysterectomy. I remember when I woke up from that, the first question out of my mouth, I was just telling my husband this the other day, was, "Did you take my ovaries?" Because all I wanted was a normal baby, and I wanted to breastfeed him. I didn't get to breastfeed Hazel. And they were like, "We left the ovaries." And that told me I could breastfeed and the cancer was probably gone and not as bad as I thought. And I remember going into postpartum thinking, wow, God's so good because here I have my perfect baby and I'm cancer free as far as I know it. I can breastfeed him. I've got my girl, my boy, like everything is perfect. We're staying in that postpartum room. And I was holding Russell and I looked down and his lip turned blue. And I didn't tell anybody. I have the deepest memory of looking at him and seeing his lip turn blue and thinking, I know what this is, but I don't want anyone to take him away from me. Like that physical separation of your baby to take to the NICU. Like I just had so much trauma surrounding that with Hazel. And, that moment probably only lasted a minute or 2 or 5, I don't know. And I told my husband, and the nurses came in, they took him up to the NICU. He started having seizures, which was the same exact onset of the disorder at the exact same time that Hazel's disorder onset. And we knew at that moment exactly what it was. But the worst part about it was standing over Russell's bed, watching him have seizure after seizure after seizure, and then having to wait for the doctors to hook him up to an EEG and confirm, what was happening so that they could medicate him and get them to slow down. But it was pretty traumatic. When one trauma and, I call it whatever you want. I call it trauma. I call it suffering. I call it, I don't know, all sorts of things, but happens over and over and over. I think Russell was one of the biggest hits that our family has had. Um, we just had so much hope and, and I guess we were just, our expectations kept building and building, and that was really hard. And
Yeah.
at that point, we still didn't have a diagnosis, so we knew, okay, it's genetic because it was same at the exact same day and a half of life, the same onset, seizures, everything. But it was a whole nother year until we got our diagnosis, and both of our kids have a rare genetic disorder. It's in the family of something called NKH. It stands for non-ketotic hyperglycinemia. It's a metabolic disorder, and a lot of people who follow me on social media are like, "Oh, I know somebody who has that disorder." But the thing about the disorder is that it's the type that our kids have that make it so rare. Is a degenerative disorder. Most kids with their specific type, which is the variant form found on the LIAS gene, most kids with that type who have been documented die at 10 days old. And there are only 2 cases in the world documented that have lived longer than Hazel. Hazel's
Wow.
7.5 and Russell is 4.5.
What do you attribute that to?
I have no idea. It is so hard. Like, I think often, how can I put this into words for, people who follow my story? And it's just this big mind flip of you have these 2 kids, you're told they're gonna die, and they're still alive, and they're thriving. I don't know. I mean, I really believe that they have a strong calling and that they have a purpose, and that's why they're still alive. Like, I mean, I guess my
Yeah.
faith, like, that's what I attribute it to. I know that nobody knows their last breath.
Julia, how in those early years with both Hazel and Russell, what were some of the things that you did to take care of your own mental health? You talked throughout your story around, you had this ideal life with your husband and, kind of like this picturesque future together. And then, of course, Hazel came and changed what your expectations were. And then Russell came and changed that again. It sounds like there was like to use your words, there was trauma, there was suffering. How, and now on social media, you're aiming to inspire and uplift, which is amazing and only possible if you can actually reconcile it with yourself first.
Uh-huh.
So if there are other, medical mamas listening to this, how can someone like you, a mom, begin to kind of piece their life back together, knowing that it's never going to be what you thought it was going to be?
Yeah. I think the hardest part for me is realizing there's no shortcut. And I was desperate for a shortcut through my suffering. Like, I was so desperate. I'm like, can I do enough essential oils and read enough and meditate enough and do enough of all of this to just get myself back to normal? And the truth is, there's no shortcut. I experienced a huge shift at the 5-year mark. And I call this Hazel happened, this section of my life really started at Hazel. So we're at 7.5 years post that suffering. And I was listening to a TikTok one day, actually, and this gal was sharing about how there's a huge mark at the 5-year mark when you've been through trauma, where you start to be able to use your trauma and your suffering to help other people. And I feel like there was nothing that I did in those early years to um, take it away or make it better. I think time. I just want to remind every mom out there, like, if you're in the NICU, if you have an under 5-year-old child who has a rare disorder, give yourself grace and time to process. For me, a huge part of my journey has been sharing it on social media. And I know that that is not something that everybody's going to do. And I get a lot of flack about it when I share the hard stuff. Like, I'll have people, people will say all sorts of crazy stuff to me, like, you need to go to counseling and da, 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 da. And I'm like, I just speak the things that people are too afraid to say out loud. And that is why people have followed my social media account. And for me, speaking those things and admitting them and saying, I live every single day terrified that Hazel's not going to wake up tomorrow because I've been told that there are a few ways that the disorder can kill them, and one of which is a major organ failure while they're sleeping. You know, admitting things like that and speaking them out loud has been a huge help for me
Yeah.
walking through this, honestly.
Yeah, it's like that's how you've kind of walked towards this concept of acceptance of your reality, is being able to speak it out loud, share with others. Again, that's not how everyone copes,
Yeah.
but for you, that has been, sounds like it has been cathartic, and it has helped kind of thrust you into this new way of living,
Yeah.
and accepting. And again, the acceptance part just feels, honestly, that's the hardest part that I have as a mom myself. I think through, gosh, and I think that a lot of people do this. I can't imagine. How do you do it? How do you do it? And it sounds like what you're saying is you do it because these are your children.
Yeah. Well, and I had this really, like, you talk about acceptance, and I had this really big moment about a year and a half ago towards the acceptance part. And I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Johnny Erickson, but she runs a massive disability ministry. And she's been in a wheelchair over 40 years, and her
Mm.
story is incredible. And I started reading one of her books, and this one section has been like, you know how people have the word of the year? This is like my phrase of the year that's got me through is she says, I believe that I've been given an incredible privilege because of the suffering that has not been taken away. And I believe that. I believe that God has allowed this suffering in our lives because he wants to use our story to inspire people that you can still have joy in the suffering. You can still have joy even when you have 2 kids are born to die. You can still have joy. And are things hard? Yes. Am I on my knees begging for people to show up and help our family all the time? Yes. Am I crying still 7.5 years into this journey? Yes. But every single day I wake up and I'm like, what is the joy that God has for me today? What is that joy nugget? Is it a smile from Hazel? Is it a giggle from Russell? Is it something silly that they do? Is it somebody that they make happy? You know? And I think that there's this misnomer in our culture that you can't hold suffering and joy together. But I believe you can. I really do.
How have you approached relationships with people that simply can't relate? I mean, did you ever feel jealousy? Did you ever feel this, gosh, I wish we just had, healthy children. I wish I didn't have to go through this. I mean, again, it's so amazing how you're explaining it. And I just wonder, like, do you still have that, knowing that, in the early days of your marriage, you were kind of living in what you felt was kind of the idealistic lifestyle?
Extreme bitterness. And I think that knowing that and knowing that it's going to keep coming, but it comes less and less and less as time goes on. Bitterness, jealousy, it's taken a lot of time. Even like I have so many amazing friends, and watching their kids grow up. One of my best friends, her daughter just got on the cheer squad that I cheered on, which I don't often tell people that I was a cheerleader, but she just got
I
on the cheer
believe
squad.
it. I believe it with your attitude, your
Yeah.
outlook. I see it, Julia. I
It
see it.
started. It started there. Um, and I have so much joy for her, and I'm so excited for her, and I feel like before at the beginning of what happened with becoming this type of parent, I couldn't have gotten to that place. I'd just be stuck in the bitterness and jealousy. And then as time goes on, I've been able to, like, just be so excited for my friends and their kids. And one thing I've realized, I don't know what the future holds. So if we want to remember the beginning of the story is I had a radical hysterectomy. People ask me all the time, two questions. Why did you have two? Well, number one, we didn't know that it was genetic. And then, will you ever have another child? I cannot have another child biologically. And that is hard. It is so hard to realize that we will never have biological grandchildren. Our kids are going to pass away. And, we don't know what the future holds. But what we've been realizing in this last year, particularly, is that maybe that desire to want to nurture and teach and help grow a child can be used in other ways. We've had so many people come in and out of our house to support us, which is why I love so much what you're doing is just bringing together all of those respite pieces. Because that's been a huge thing that's really just kept me alive. The meals, the people, the laundry, all those people who have shown up. But recently we've had like some homeschool kids who've been helping us and they're 12 years old. And I told my husband, I'm like, maybe we won't ever officially adopt, but we just bring one of these kids under our arms and love them and show them, what a normal life is. And not all these kids that come and help and play with Hazel, have the gift of having parents who love each other in a normal home.
It really makes me pause because I think so much of what we tend to focus on is how do you do it today? How do you handle the challenge, of course, the physical, the emotional, the spiritual challenge of raising children with this diagnosis, with this disorder. But what you just said, I think, is also a really important piece that a lot of people can't really appreciate, which is that you're already looking into the future of what this means for your family.
Yeah.
And so it is not just, again, grieving the life that you thought you were going to have, but truly coming to terms with the reality is that as you get older, certain things are just not possible.
Yeah.
And I do find it so beautiful that you're able to kind of take this mindset and say, okay, well, maybe we can't have it in the way that is traditional, but that doesn't mean that we can't find that joy.
Yeah.
And with a different spin on it, which is effectively how you're living your entire life. So it would almost be bizarre for you to want it any other way because this is the way you've lived your life for so long.
Yeah. Well, this is, my husband and I have been recently talking about this, just the gift of being able to pour into other people. We also have hours for our kids to have a CNA in home, which those hours are rarely filled, which we could do a whole nother podcast to talk about that. But the way of pouring into different people that, really God places in our life, it's just removing the pride. Like for me and my pride, it'd be like, let's adopt a child. We're going to do the right thing and it's going to look good on Instagram. And we're the parents who have the two, and it's like, no, maybe we don't need the perfect Instagram picture. Maybe it's just we buy an outfit for a kid who doesn't have money or we get to support kids in these other ways. And I feel like for me, it's removing that pride of what I really wanted and just being available for it to look different. And that has taken a long time. And the one thing that I do not want people to listen to this podcast and miss, do not judge my chapter by where you're at. I beg you, because if I were to watch this podcast and I was at year 1, 2, or 3 of my suffering journey, I'd be like, oh, nice for you. Your life looks perfect. And it's like, no, there's no shortcut. I've been through all those 7.5 years to get to where I am today. And then I'm going to go through another 7.5 to get to where I get to go. And I think that one of the things that I love to share the most that gets people rubbed a little bit wrong is just that it's still really hard. Like, it's still really hard. Our daily life is really hard. We have CNA hours that are unfilled. My husband's a full-time paramedic and he is gone. He does 24-hour shifts. I am here caring for my kids alone a lot. Russell is 4.5. He's in a wheelchair. They're both nonverbal and it is difficult, but I refuse to let that define me. Like, I just really believe that our kids are still alive because God wants to use their life to have an impact. And that brings me up to like why I started writing our story. You know, I share it on social media, but I also started writing it and started writing it in children's books, which turned into the hazelnut movement. And I have the incredible privilege to go into schools and to remind kids that sometimes your greatest challenge becomes your greatest superpower, and that ability or not, we all have a purpose. And I think that having a purpose within the suffering is huge. And you probably
Yes.
see that with all the people that you talk to. You know, the people who are in my position who are thriving are people who have made something out of it. You know, they're writing books, they're sharing on social media, and they're having an impact with their suffering. I think the people who are stuck in the why me and the victim mode, which we can get into, I've been there. Like, I have been there and I still get there, you know, maybe 1 out of 100 days, whereas before it was 99 out of 100. But is finding that purpose.
Julia, on social media for a second, social media has certainly positives. And, one of the things that people rightfully call out is this comparison creep. Um, was there ever a time where being on social media was a struggle for you? Like, did you ever have to take a step back from social media because you were reminded of kind of the delta between what you have and what others have, both outside of the medical, rare disorder community and inside of it?
For me, particularly, comparison like that has not been a struggle. But at the same time, when I started my social media, now I call career, because that's what I do full time, I was really taught well on how to create and not consume.
Mm.
And I feel like that's why I am going into year 7. I'm like 6.5 years in, and I haven't there's been 2 days in 6.5 years that I did not show up on social media, and it was after we found out about Russell, because I was so afraid to let down my followers who had been following the story, and they were so excited, and we had announced, "Russell's born, he's perfect," and I didn't know how to tell people, and those are the only 2 days,
Wow.
which I don't
Uh,
yeah.
the thing that I love about this conversation is I think that whether you are someone that has a kiddo with a rare disorder or any sort of disability or not, there's just a lot of inspiration. I mean, there's a lot of things in motherhood that is very challenging for modern moms, right? As
Yeah.
modern moms, we're constantly looking out at the people around us saying, well, they're doing this, whether it's a vacation or whether it's the house that they're living or the education that they're providing. And it does begin to kind of suppress the joy that you can feel in your own experience. And that's part of what to me is so enriching about this conversation is that your perspective and the approach that you've chosen to take and to walk along, like it is really inspiring for everybody
Mhm.
because what you're saying is, I mean, there's so many words that you've said today that just are kind of ring true, like the bitterness. Like I really like that framing, like pride, purpose. Those are all really important words that as moms, I think we all struggle with,
Yeah.
regardless of your circumstance. Certainly, it can be harder in your situation. And what you're saying is the sooner you kind of accept that what's actually happening, the sooner you can actually enjoy and embrace the life that you do have and the purpose that you can create.
Yeah. It took a really long time for us to see our children as a gift and not a burden. And honestly, one of the biggest ways, I should have shared this earlier, but one of the biggest ways that we've been able to transition into that space is going to this camp that we go to every single year now. And I'm a part of their ministry and everything now because I'm their super fan. It's called Luke 14. They do Camp Celebrate. And it is the first and only place I have ever been where you walk in and it is perfectly designed for your child, ability or not. And your
Mm.
child is elevated and thought of as perfect. And I realized the first year at that camp that I always looked at my kids as a burden and that their disorder and their disability was a burden. And then I walked away and I'm like, all these people, all these volunteers who are not only paying to be there to volunteer and give this amazing week to my kids, but they see my kids and they see a gift. And I walked
Yeah.
away from that first camp with that. And so I think one of the biggest pieces of advice for people who are going through what we are is get around other rare disorder moms. Get around other NICU moms. If your kid has cleft palate, if whatever it is, get around other people. Social media has been a huge vessel for me in that way. In fact, I got the privilege to meet this amazing gal, Millie, who found me through social media by searching hashtags NKH LIAS gene. And she messaged me and she was like, I have a child who's got the exact same disorder. I'm like, no, he doesn't. And sure enough, they lived in the UK. And I got to FaceTime with her and meet her and know that I wasn't alone. And I thought that we would be walking through this journey together for a really long time. And Otto passed away when he was 8 months old. And she's amazing. What she has done with her son's life is incredible. But I think that there is so much power in getting around people who are going through what you are going through. And I think that's the coolest part of the internet is
Yeah.
you get on there and search a hashtag and you can find somebody. And you'd be surprised that even people who have large followings will write you back.
Yeah.
Not all of
Especially
them.
when it comes to your kid. Yeah, but especially when it comes to your kid. I think that tips the scales. Julia, for anyone listening, where can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Ermin Julia, and my biggest platform is TikTok. TikTok's kind of taken over, and really, it's changed the way that I feel like I influence. And it's called my what do you call it? I don't even know. I'm like I swear I'm a professional influencer, but I'm really not. I just am a mom who shows my life. But it's Inspirational Mama 87. And, yeah, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, but you can also follow the Hazelnut Movement, and, yeah, we're all over the place. Search my name, they'll find us.
Well, Julia, thank you so much. I'm quite confident that there will be a lot of people that are inspired and uplifted by the story that you told today, and a lot of people that will continue to pray for your
Mhm.
family and the journey
Yeah,
that you're on, both for their physical health, but also for yours as well, as you and your husband navigate an unusual path, but one that is still certain to provide the joy that you've given your children. So thank you. And I appreciate you mentioning the support piece. So much about what Julia mentioned today is at the core of what we believe at Support Now, which is that community matters. And there's a lot of ways that supporters can be there for the people that they love that are navigating not just one particular tough time, but really a chronic tough time, which is the situation that Julia finds herself. So again, whether that's money or meals or what we call lend a hand, which Julia referred to as respite, Support Now is there as a resource, so that communities can better show up and be there for the long haul, not just in the immediate moments of suffering. So again, I continue to be inspired by you, Julia. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to tell more of your story and
of
look forward
course.
to many more conversations.
Of course, thank you so much.